Welcome, friends. We are so excited to see you tonight. It is great to see lots of people that we already know and love your smiling faces and look forward to this conversation that we're going to have together tonight. I want to introduce you first to me and the other two presenters. So I'm Kim Ingram, and I am the first elected clergy person on our delegation from Western North Carolina. And so that is my role in participating tonight. But as many of you know, I also serve on conference staff as the Director of Ministerial Services and the conference secretary. And then also with us tonight as part of the presentation team is Jennifer Davis. Jennifer is the first elected layperson on the Western North Carolina delegation. And she can tell you more about herself when she speaks in a moment. And then Wanda Musgrave is the chair of our Western North Carolina Host Committee, serves along with a team, but she's the primary point person in Western North Carolina for what it means for us to be the hosts of the General Conference here in Charlotte. So this seems to be something people are really interested in, and she'll talk a lot about that in a few minutes. I want to open us with prayer. And I decided, since this is a United Methodist meeting, talking about a United Methodist meeting, I go to the United Methodist Book of Worship to find a prayer tonight. And so it is one of the night praise and prayer, midweek prayers. And let us pray together. Grant, O eternal God, that we may lie down in peace and raise us up, O sovereign, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel, and for your name's sake, be our help. Shield us from hatred and plague. Keep us from war and famine and anguish. Subdue our inclination to evil. O God, our guardian and helper, our gracious and merciful ruler, give us refuge in the shadow of your wings. O guard our coming and our going, that now and always we have life and peace. Blessed is the Lord. Amen. Amen. So just a couple of things to note, and I need to double check that my viewing has the PowerPoint. No, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Dave. And the next slide. Okay, so if you'll put your questions in the chat, we'll try to answer them as we go along. So we're going to do this kind of in sections. Even if you've already put the question in the chat, if it doesn't get answered in the kind of segment where we're talking about it, go ahead and put it in the chat again, because we'll be watching for the live questions as we go along. And then we expect at the end of the presentation, there'll be more time for questions and answers. So once we've gotten it all covered, if there's anything else we haven't told you that we might know the answer to, we'll do that then. And just to encourage engagement, we're going to have 6 polls as we go through. So just kind of a heads up, if you've done a Zoom poll, it'll be familiar. But if you haven't, something will pop up on your screen and ask you a question, and you'll have to make a choice for the answer. And then at the end of 30 seconds, Dave will show us the results of what everybody collectively said. So when we get to that, we'll explain it a little bit better. But just wanted to give you a heads up that we were going to be doing some polling tonight. And so now I'm going to turn it over, and Jennifer's going to get us started with some content.
Well, it's good to see all of you. So glad you could make it, and certainly glad to know that all of you are interested in knowing about General Conference. I think probably one of the most exciting things for at least maybe me and Wanda and Kim is we don't have to travel so far this time. We don't have to pack a bag, get on a plane, fight traffic anywhere, figure out what you're going to take, what's the weather like, and all that stuff. It's really a relief to be in Charlotte, even though it's a lot of work. So first of all, you see, I think that's the beautiful skyline of Charlotte. And the theme of the conference comes from Psalm 46. And we know that, be still and know that I am God. So what is General Conference? Well, it's a big old meeting. It's a big old gathering. It's the place where we will generate the documents that we all know. It produces the document, the Book of Discipline, and the Book of Resolutions. I guess, Dave, we ought to go to the next screen. I'm sorry. These are the documents that will come out of the General Conference, and as you can see, we are currently using the Book of Discipline for 2016 and the Book of Resolutions for 2016. But that's the primary goal of this conference, among other things. It's the only entity that can speak on behalf of the entire denomination. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see a little bit about the global nature of our church. So we have Africa Central conferences, we have Europe Central conferences, we have the Philippines Central conferences, and we should all be, I think, just grateful that our ministry and our mission and our faith spreads across the world. Let's pop to the next one. Well, yeah. So what will happen in Charlotte is there'll be 862 delegates who will come from all around the world. About 44% of these delegates are to the rescheduled General Conference. This is the rescheduled General Conference. We should have had a conference in 2020, but the pandemic interrupted that. So about 44% of them come from outside the United States. So you can see the global nature of our conference. 32% of the delegates will come from Africa, 6% from the Philippines, and about 5%, not quite 5%, from Europe. But 56% of the delegates are from all over the United States. The largest delegations you will see are from North Katanga in the Congo, is 50, and Cote d'Ivoire at 32. The largest delegations in the United States are from Virginia and North Georgia. There's 22 of each from those. And most of the conferences in Europe and the Philippines have 2 delegates, as well as 12 conferences that are in the United States. Excuse me. Each annual conference has at least 1 laity and 1 clergy. Western North Carolina Conference has a total of 20. So we have 10 lay delegates and 10 clergy delegates to the General Conference, with an additional 10 laity and 10 clergy delegates who serve as reserves to the jurisdictional conference. There are, okay, we'll go to the next slide. In areas where there are no United Methodist Church, there may be autonomous or affiliated Methodist churches. Pardon that. Affiliated United churches or other Christian churches that have an official relationship with the United Methodist Church. So each of those gets 2 delegates, the affiliated autonomous, affiliated, united, and concordant agreement get 2 delegates, 1 laity and 1 clergy. The British Methodist Church gets 4, Mexico gets 2, Puerto Rico gets 2, and the Caribbean and the Americas get 2. They make up the concordant. So, and normally our General Conference is held every 4 years. But the current situation has put us at the point where the conference that was to be held in 2020 has been rescheduled to 2024. So those delegates who were elected to serve in 2020 are continuing as delegates into 2024. We are currently the longest serving delegation that we've ever had. But it's been fun. And before I take you to the first poll, I want you all to know that we have, as a delegation, worked seriously and continuously to try to keep people informed. And we hope that some of the information that we're doing in our delegation meetings is being shared with you in your local churches. So now we want to do a little poll. And I think this is interesting because our poll is this. We ask you 3 questions. Do you own a book of discipline? Yes or no? Or do you intend to purchase one after we finish this session? And I hope you saw Kim's note in the chat that we will make this PowerPoint available to anyone who wants to see it. So Dave is, oh, look at that. Most of you apparently do own a book of discipline. So I will tell you that once we have finished our business at annual conference, the new book of discipline we hope will be out in January. Once we have concluded our business and all is said and done, we expect to have a new book of discipline in January, which will say it's the 2024 discipline. And if all goes well, then the next one won't be until 2028. If all goes well and as we hope and expect it. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Wanda, who's going to talk a little bit about volunteering and give you some more information about General Conference.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Wanda Musgrave, and I am the local host to General Conference for Western North Carolina Conference. And I want to try something out on you before I start. This is kind of a practice, and I'm trying to do this, so I'm really ready to go by April. So welcome to Charlotte, everyone. The General Conference of the United Methodist Church will be in Charlotte at the Charlotte Convention Center from April 23rd through May 3rd, 2024. Charlotte was selected on the suitability and capacity of available meeting facilities, proximity of hotel rooms, accessibility, amenities, and convenience of travel. I understand that we won't have as many doing airline travel this year because we're in the Southeast jurisdiction and a lot of people will be driving this year. Did you know that Charlotte is the 16th most populous city in the U.S. with a major airline hub, American? We have 600,000 square feet convention center that is just 7 miles from the airport. The convention center and hotels in uptown Charlotte are within walking distance of 200 restaurants. We have been working very closely with the staff of the General Conference, the staff at the Convention Center, and the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority to ensure this is a very positive and welcoming experience to our friends in Christ from around the world. As Jennifer said, the theme of this General Conference is, "And know that I am God." If you can imagine, this will be an event of many thousands of people from 4 continents who speak 10 languages. They will all be together for 2 weeks doing the work of the General Conference. Hosting General Conference for Western North Carolina gives us the opportunity to offer gracious hospitality and create a holy space to support the delegates as they come together to do their work on behalf of the United Methodist Church. If we could go to the second slide that we have. As I said, I'm your local host. My co-host for this are the Reverend Nicole Jones and Reverend DeAndre Ash. We are also working in collaboration with the North Carolina Conference in co-hosting this event. We, as the Western North Carolina Conference, have been working hard identifying coordinators for each of the necessary volunteers in the areas that we need to fill volunteers with, and you can see them on your screen right now. Also, during the PowerPoint presentation, there will be a copy of a brochure for General Conference. This will all be on the website when it's launched, and we're going to be asking all of the local churches to use this brochure as a tool to promote General Conference to your congregation and give everyone a chance to learn and experience this important event for us as United Methodist. Our goal is to involve as many people in Western North Carolina as we can. So options for volunteering will include the airport, the hotels, and the convention center. The airport opportunities, you will give a warm welcome to everyone as they arrive in Charlotte for General Conference. If this is where you want to volunteer, imagine you will be the first point of contact with those arriving and have a special opportunity to set the stage for our very welcoming hospitality. You will direct arrivals to the baggage area and to ground transportation. We will be working with the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority on transportation to and from the airport. And along with them, the General Conference staff will closely monitor flights of the people arriving, and they will be in constant contact with our volunteers on updates on arrivals and when departures go, and also in changes or where hotel assignments will be to these people so we can deliver them to the right place. Hotel opportunities. As I said earlier, we will probably have a lot of people driving. So when they arrive at their hotel, you will be their first point of contact. We will offer friendly welcome as our guests arrive at the hotels. Many will have been traveling for hours, and we can assist them in getting checked in and to their rooms for much needed rest. You will be there to answer any questions that might arise and assist our guests in any way possible. Registration opportunities. You will greet the delegates as they enter the convention center to become registered for the conference. These will be delegates, observers, and guests. You need to be able to pay close attention to details while helping those registering understand established protocols for this process. You need to be comfortable using simple technology. The convention center, your opportunities will be to greet everyone who enters the convention center. You will answer questions that arise and help them find their locations in the convention center, as well as offer help with local restaurants and things to do in and around Charlotte. We have numerous art, history, science museums, galleries, and theaters. You will work closely with the office at the convention center that offers this information on a daily basis. As you can see, there are many opportunities to volunteer in these areas to offer hospitality to our visitors. Once the visitors are all signed up and assigned, the general conference staff will be offering training in those specific areas. As you saw in the slide before, all of our volunteers will be wearing red aprons with buttons that say BUMC with the cross and flame on the button. There will be many people, again, coming to general conference who do not speak English. By having the cross and the flame on our volunteer button, it says to those people, they are here to help me. I recognize the cross and flame logo. The volunteer website is developed and released by the staff of General Conference. We are told it will be launched by the end of January. Volunteer help will be needed April 19th through May 4th, and the opportunities to serve will be set up in 4-hour shifts on those days in the needed areas. When it is officially launched, volunteers will apply online at welcometogc.org. After your application is processed, you will receive an invitational email with a link to select your available times and dates to volunteer. Volunteers are responsible for any cost associating with their time to serve. Now, I believe we're going to do a poll if there are any questions you have.
Let's take just a minute before we do. Well, the poll's open, but after the poll, we'll just see whether there's anything specific to what Wanda said. If you put a question in the chat, we'll go ahead and look at that. I think she's answered a lot of your questions, but just in case. Is the poll open, Dave? There we go.
So Wanda, I see a question in the chat. They want to know, is there any pre-work that needs to be done before the event happens? That's not listed as something to volunteer for.
There will be, and I touched on that. When the volunteer site is launched and we have all the volunteers signed up, the general conference staff will come to Charlotte or maybe other sites in North Carolina to train people on what they will need to do in those particular areas.
So Wanda, it looks like our volunteers are pretty well distributed among the different options that
That's
there's
good
going
to
to be.
see.
So that's good news. If
Yes, and
you are, go
I'm
ahead.
glad to see you're all ready to go.
Yeah, I think
I
if
did.
you're on this call and you live in the greater Charlotte area, hopefully you will, when the information is available, you'll be sure to let your church know. I know as a Gaston County resident, I thought people from Gaston County can do the airport pretty easily because that's on our side of Charlotte. So just kind of thinking about what's accessible for folks that you know and relate to, and then inviting them to participate in particular ways.
And remember, we will let you know as soon as this is launched, but the website where all of this will appear will be welcometogc.org.
So Chris Mars says that if we want to organize a NASCAR tour for spouses, she could help with the planning and hosting of that. That's pretty exciting. So we'll pass that along to the people that are doing this, the spouse hospitality. That's neat.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So Thelma asked if the discipline is printed in multiple languages, and the answer is yes. And we should probably know which ones, but I know French and Swahili maybe. I'll see if I can find that out when it's not my turn to present in a minute.
Hmm.
And then I also saw a question earlier about how do you get to, or how can you request a preacher for April 28th, the Sunday that's in the middle of General Conference? And I did text Amy Coles to find out there is a sign up available, but I haven't seen yet the link to it. So we'll be
Kim,
sure that gets. Oh,
I'm
go
going
ahead,
to
Wanda.
address that later.
Okay, then we'll wait and talk about that. Then let's go ahead and move on to the next part, and we'll see what other questions we have later. Thanks, Wanda. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens at General Conference, specifically as it relates to legislation and the kinds of things that churches will want to know and benefit from. And so just kind of the question, I found this question on one of the General Conference web pages. How does the General Conference impact the local church? And that seemed to me the kind of thing that you might be interested in knowing. So just some examples of that. So the legislation, and I'll talk in a minute about how legislation works, but the legislation may address the structure of a district, an annual conference, the denomination that could affect the local church. Legislation relates to the global nature of the church, and I'll talk a little bit more about regionalization in a minute. I looked up what petitions come under the local church legislation committee, and there was one about how the local church impacts the climate in their neighborhood, in their area. And there's one on non-discrimination for lay staff. So those are just some examples of how legislation might affect a local church. Also, as it relates to giving, there will be legislation around education in Africa. And when things like that are approved, then they get built into the apportionment system. Another one of those is Episcopal support. That's how our bishops all get paid, is through the Episcopal Fund. And that happens through the general church budget, which then comes through our apportionment payments. And another example of that is resourcing for leadership and discipleship. So those are some of the ways our giving gets impacted and we benefit from and support other kinds of things. Mission initiatives. One example that General Conference passed a number of years ago, but you might be familiar with, is Imagine No Malaria. So that's just an example of where the General Conference initiates a mission initiative that then churches and conferences, districts can participate in. And then, of course, the social issues through resolutions and the social principles that I'll talk a little bit more about is another way that a local church might get impacted or affected or be interested in what goes on at General Conference. So just to talk about the legislative process for a minute. So petitions are a primary work of what happens at General Conference. Petitions to the General Conference can come from individuals, from groups, from annual conferences, from the general agencies, from local churches. For example, Western North Carolina submitted 2 petitions in 2019, and then 2 more petitions came out of our last annual conference meeting that were submitted additional legislation. And I'll kind of talk about how that works in a minute. Petitions have to originate from United Methodist. So not just anybody can submit petitions. You have to be United Methodist to submit a petition. And then all the petitions are printed in advance in And I'll show you on the next slide where you find those. Petitions are then assigned to 14 legislative committees. So there are 14 different committees that meet the first week of General Conference to begin to work on these petitions. So 3 of them relate to church and society, and then a couple of the others, just for example, there's one on global ministries, there's one on the local church, there's one on financial administration. So depending on where, there are 14 of them, but depending on where in the book of discipline the legislation is directed, most all of the legislation is either around the book of discipline or the book of resolutions. So depending on what part of the book of discipline it relates to, it gets divided up into these 14 committees. And then the committees meet the first week of General Conference for about 4 days straight. And out of the legislative committee comes the action of the committee for the body, for the full body. And so it could go on a consent calendar. It could come out of committee and go on a consent calendar. It could come out of committee and be calendared for the body to discuss the second week, or it might never receive action. So anything related to the Constitution has to be approved by a 2/3 majority at the General Conference. And then if it's not part of the Constitution, it just requires a simple majority for it to be approved. And then in the end, it ends up in the Book of Discipline or the Book of Resolutions. So that's kind of how legislative committee works. Now, this is the ADCA and the DCA. The ADCA stands for the Advanced Daily Christian Advocate, and the DCA stands for the Daily Christian Advocate. And I'm going to show you at the end where the website is that you can find these. But just to kind of give you an idea of how this has worked, right now on the website, you can, on the General Conference website, you can find the legislation that was submitted in 2019 for the 2020 General Conference. Then we were going to have that General Conference was going to be postponed, and an additional amount of legislation got submitted, and it was not printed at that time because the General Conference got postponed again. And then there was another deadline for legislation to get submitted. So all the new legislation that's not already online was supposed to go online today. I haven't seen it yet, but I expect this week all the legislation coming to General Conference will be available for your bedtime reading when you can't fall asleep at night. So I'm not sure how to advise you. If you're really interested in it, if you're really interested in legislation and what's coming before, I'll show you. So this is one of 2 books of legislation that's already been printed. So you can see how thick it is. I only have one of them right here on my desk. And then we also have at least half that and maybe twice that amount still to come to us in more legislation. So just to say that if you were thinking about studying the legislation of General Conference, I would suggest you pick one of the committees that most interests you. So let's say you're interested in ordained ministry. That's the one I'm on. So let's say you're interested in that. Go to the ordained ministry section and just begin reading those petitions. And you get a variety of the different perspectives United Methodists have around different issues related to the United Methodist Church. You'll find 2 petitions that are completely opposite in what they are suggesting that the church do around some issue. So anyway, some people are really interested in this. For some people, it's just way too much information. But I really love it. So I recommend you look at some of the legislation and see what you think. Now, I'm going to go, if you'll go to the next slide, Dave, I'm going to just give you an overview of 5 of the major areas of legislation that are coming to General Conference. And I'm going to take a sip first. The first of these, Josh asked about in the chat, and that is regionalization. So regionalization is, so let me back up. So we have annual conferences. That is what Western North Carolina is. And then we have jurisdictional conferences, and that's regional in the United States. So there are 5 jurisdictional conferences in the United States, and they're regional. So we're in the Southeastern jurisdiction. And then there are central conferences, which are what the conferences outside the United States are called. And that matters as we talk about regionalization, because the history of regionalization, kind of way back when, is that the denomination became worldwide and regionalization became a component of who we are as United Methodist at that point. Now, since then, or more recently, one of the mandates of the 2016 General Conference is that the Standing Committee on Central Conferences, that is a committee of representatives from the different central conferences. The General Conference told that committee they need to work on a general book of discipline. So what that looks like, we don't have it yet. It's been proposed, but we don't have it yet. But what a general book of discipline would do is say, these are the things that matter to all United Methodists and that have to follow, everybody has to follow. And then there's pieces that are contextual and different areas can contextualize different parts of the book of discipline. The central conferences can already do that. The book of discipline is already written where the central conferences have the flexibility to, according to their context and their needs, make adaptations to the book of discipline. But the United States, the jurisdictions do not have that flexibility. The jurisdictions have to abide by the book of discipline as it is written. So this was kind of the first step in what we currently have in regionalization legislation is this general book of discipline. And the Standing Committee on Central Conferences, so the people from the central conferences, recognized that the United States needed a way to do adaptable work. And so through sort of a process over time since 2020, what we have now is legislation called regionalization legislation, where the Standing Committee and the Connectional Table collaborated on legislation that would form regional conferences. So the United States would become a regional conference. All of the United States would become a regional conference. And all of the current central conferences would become regional conferences. And I just wanted to, I'm only going to share with you one other piece about this. And then I'll show you at the end where you can find the legislation to do a deeper dive. But there were values that were considered by the Connectional Table and by the Standing Committee on Central Conferences. And I particularly want to talk about this because it goes to what Josh's concern in the chat was earlier. So one of the values is equity. Another is decolonizing our mission, relationships, and structure. So decolonization, that's something Josh pointed toward, has been a value of regionalization. Giving agency or power to make decisions and lead with integrity is a value. Self-determination within a connectional system. Decentering the United States. So part of the regionalization legislation is so the United States isn't always central or center in many of the conversations and decisions. Unity, focus on mission and ministry, and maintaining Wesleyan theological doctrine and identity. Those are the values and the motivation for the regionalization legislation. I'm not going to spend as much time on the rest of it. Well, I am on the next one, but I know I've gone a little bit into the weeds, but I do think it's important because there are a couple of these you're going to hear a lot about as you pay attention, and regionalization is one of those. The next one is the revised social principles. And the revised social principles were proposed back in 2020 as part of the legislation that's already available. And then we did not meet, so we haven't talked about it yet. But oh, Ida, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop and answer Ida's question. Is there a reason I'm continuously interrupted every couple minutes? Is everybody experiencing that, or is that just Ida's connection? Ida, that may be your internet connection. I'm sorry you're having that trouble. So the revised social principles, and they're available in a small book. But I just want to read what the front of that says. So the nature of the revised social principles captures the Wesleyan spirit of social holiness and ethical action. Over 4,000 United Methodists from around the world spent 8 years in the process to review and update the United Methodist social principles. So it is not something that was done quickly by a few people or kind of in a haphazard way. It's been a very intentional thing over a long period of time by a lot of people giving input. It reflects the United Methodist response to today's most pressing social issues and is available for consideration and approval by the General Conference. Three things that they highlight about these. One is it integrates biblical and Wesleyan references throughout the text. So when you have a chance to look at it, and we'll show you how to find it, that's one thing to pay attention to. Another is that the principles are written in a concise and clear way. And the third, which I think might be the most important, is that the worldwide nature of the church is reflected in all areas of the document. So there was a lot of intentionality in the document about reflecting worldwide understanding. Oh, thank you, Havala. That's super helpful. Okay, and then just a couple of the other things to mention about the revised social principles is that from a global perspective, it'll be a resource for mission and ministry, equipping churches to do ministry in the local context. So there again, this will be something that will be a resource and of usefulness to the local church. They advocate for social justice that dates to John Wesley, founder of Methodism in the 1730s. So this is, while it's based in more contextual and current understanding about social, the social nature of the United States and around the world, it also is really foundational from the Methodist movement starting in the 18th century. So it's really rooted and grounded in our whole Methodist history and tradition. And then the other thing I'll mention is that the General Board of Church and Society is the United Methodist agency that stewards the social principles. So they're the ones that did the work to get all of the input. And their hope, I saw a presentation on it last week, their hope is that the new document, the new social principles will be considered, and instead of adjusting the old ones or doing some kind of editing to the old ones, that the legislative committee will take the new set and work with those. So it's exciting. It's been a long time since we've had new social principles, and it's exciting to think about. Now, the last three areas of legislation I'll cover more quickly. Inclusion is a primary area and consideration for legislation. And so that will be something that delegates will be paying a lot of attention to, especially removal of the language around that discriminates against LGBTQ people. So that will be significant. And then the budget will be a significant piece of legislation, the budget for 2025 to 2029. The proposal is a significant reduction in the budget, which then in turn will be a significant reduction in apportionments. But the budget's not yet available. There's still one more meeting in February where they are working to give us the final numbers of what we'll be looking at General Conference. And then the last significant piece of legislation that is of kind of interest to a lot of people is around WestPath, and that's the pension and health. They are proposing a new pension plan, and that plan will reduce the cost to churches. It changes kind of the structure of how the pension works. And then also the other, we heard a presentation from them last month. The others around their investment strategies, and that will be a significant piece that they're wanting us to pay attention to. So just a couple other things from me. We can go on to the next slide. I know y'all are thankful you don't have to listen to me much longer right now. I want to just give you an idea about the general agencies, because this is a significant amount of what happens at General Conference for a number of reasons. A lot of the legislation that I just mentioned to you, and in fact, all the legislation pretty much I just mentioned to you, some pieces of it will come from some of our general agencies. And these are the general, oops, I misspelled discipleship. I got it wrong. These are the agencies that submit legislation. So for example, you'll see Church and Society, the second one, they submitted the revised social principles. Anyway, so these are the agencies that do the work of the denomination in some particular areas. Okay, and that's it for me for this section. So we're going to do a poll. Let's see if there are any questions for me specifically before we go on. Somebody asks, what is the book? I assume you're talking about the book of legislation, and I will show you. Oh, it looks like Havala got that one. It's the book on revised social principles. So I think we got the question. So we're ready for the poll. And the poll is around how familiar you are with polity, structure, and doctrine of the United Methodist Church. Oh, the third one, the question is, I'm mostly connected through United Women in Faith or United Methodist Men. I made the answer too long, so you can't see the rest of it, but.
Yeah, it says through United Women in Faith or United Methodist Men.
Oh, I can't see United Methodist Men. My box is not big enough. I just
Yeah.
made it bigger.
We should have added a question. I don't know much and I don't want to know anymore.
Okay, I had another choice and I decided to remove it.
It's a lot. And Kim, I don't see where you misspelled discipleship.
Oh, I think the C and the S were backwards or something. Anyway, it didn't look right when I looked at it. Okay, well, this is great. So the large majority of you are familiar, either know a great deal or are familiar through the district and annual conference. So that's exciting. Wanda, I think I'm handing it to you.
And I'm up next. Okay, as you see on this slide, if you're planning to volunteer, visit, or observe during General Conference, one tip we can give you is Charlotte has a light rail, which will make it possible for you to park off-site and ride directly into the convention center. Parking is free on the Blue Line at the Blue Line stations, and it costs, I think I checked today, $4.40 for a one-way ride, and there is a senior citizens discount. This is a wonderful opportunity that Charlotte offers to the General Conference, because having lived in Charlotte my whole life, parking in Uptown is very limited and very expensive. So, I would suggest that if you're volunteering, maybe you get a buddy and come together and ride the light rail and into Uptown Charlotte. In addition to the areas I mentioned earlier for volunteering, there will also be opportunities to volunteer through the General Conference staff, because they handle the volunteers for like pages and marshals. I know some of the people that I've talked with have done this in the past, and when the website is launched, we should be able to put something on there about that, how to do that. And if not, you can get in touch with me and I will know how to get you in touch with the right person to do that. In Western North Carolina, we are also going to be offering opportunities to be part of General Conference through events during this time at your local churches. We want as many people as possible to be involved in this event. This is big for Charlotte, big for Western North Carolina. Maybe the only time you see this happen. So we would want to get as many people involved as possible. If you can't be in Charlotte or you can't come downtown and serve in these areas, you can be a part through your local church. We're beginning to meet every month, maybe twice a month at the conference office about these opportunities. Amy Coles is going to head that up for us. Somebody asked about preaching in the churches. That will be on Sunday, the 28th. We are meeting on Thursday, and we're going to talk about this, and then we'll get that information out to you as quickly as possible. We're talking also with mission teams and things we're trying to put together, and hopefully we'll be able to put together a mission project that we can do during this time to not only serve General Conference, but serve our purpose of being in mission with we're not sure what that's going to look like right now, but it's going to be a mission project that will serve our communities and that everybody across the conference can participate in. It may be a competition. We just don't know. So be on the lookout for that. We also are going to have on the 21st, before the General Conference starts on the 23rd, on the 21st, on Sunday, the 21st, Bishop Carter is asking that all of our churches have a day of prayer for the General Conference across our whole connection, so that as we anticipate the start on the 23rd, we will all be praying together. And I ask you to do that, which is probably the most important part, is that during this time, we do need to be in prayer together for the General Conference, for our annual conferences, for all of our United Methodist churches, for our delegates, our bishops, and all the lives that will be touched and changed by the work of General Conference 2024. As your host team, we look forward to seeing you and serving together at General Conference. As I said to the coordinators when I recruited them, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be something that we've never done before, but it's also going to be fellowship. We're going to try to have some fun and enjoy ourselves along the way as we offer gracious Charlotte hospitality to everyone. It's an opportunity for Charlotte, for Western North Carolina, and the United Methodist Church to extend the love of Christ to everyone we come in contact with. I would ask you to please consider making a commitment to be a part of this joyful, spirit-filled General Conference. I want to thank you for your partnership in this important work. And I'm not somebody you can't get in touch with. Jennifer and Kim know how to get in touch with me, people at the conference office. And I would just offer up, if you have a question sometime, just find a way to get in touch with me and send it to me. I am available. This is what I am committed to doing until we finish May 3rd. And I just want all of you to join in this as much as you possibly can. And I have a homework assignment for you. Between now and April, I want all of y'all to be practicing on the best Charlotte, Western North Carolina smiles you have to offer and being able to do your own. Welcome to Charlotte, everyone. So thank you. It's been an honor to be with you.
Wanda, a question in the chat. Before you go to the poll, will churches that have vans, are they going to be provide travel assistance, pickup, etc.?
We're working on that. We're not sure what what the needs are going to be. So that'll be something that we probably have to work on as we go along. I know we have, we're going to be meeting with the, what we call the churches in the general vicinity of the uptown area. We have several large churches, and we've already been in contact with many of those churches, and they're more than willing to help with transportation or anything that we may need. So that's what, as we go along in this process, as you volunteer, ask those questions, get in touch with us, and we will address them all and try to help it any way that we possibly can. I also wanted to say that if you have if your desires to volunteer at the airport, well, that's not going to be every day. So you can also volunteer at if your airport time is up, come volunteer to be a greeter or someone to offer information. And we're going to need people that will help around the convention center. It is a big place. I mean, a big place. So we're going to need some people to show. And to us that live here, I mean, we've been there for events, and we kind of can navigate it. But if it's the first time you've been there, that's not going to be easy. So we're going to have people that will help show you around. There's going to be things for a lot of people to do. So like I said, when you sign up, if you're going to sign up to be registration, when you finish with registration, if you want to stick around with us, we'll find something for you to do, I promise. So just know that I'm available, Nicole's available. We will be here for anything that you need.
Wanda, another question. I'm not sure if you mentioned this or not because I was answering a chat, but did you mention that the observers will have to sign in, like everybody will have to sign in and get a name tag?
Yes.
Okay.
We will have registration tables for delegates, and then we will have registration tables for observers. Everybody will have to sign in. You will not be allowed anywhere in the convention center without a badge of some sort, be it a delegate, an observer, a host. Everybody will have to have identification. I know we've been asked in the past about security. There, of course, will be security. As in any event like this, there's security at the convention center for all events, and we will be observing all those rules. That's what General Conference staff is working on. But yes, everybody will have to register. You cannot just walk in and roam around the convention center. You have to have a badge.
Clint is asking, are you able to register as an observer in advance, or is that only upon arrival?
We're still working. When I was with in this position, I am on the Committee for General Conference, and we're still working out some of the observer actual questions like that. So I'm not exactly sure where we're going to be able to register as an observer, but we will try to post that online when we launch the website, and I will address that with the business manager for the General Conference and the secretary for the General Conference as one of the questions that you have, and find out about that. And then Kim said that in questions like these that we're not exactly sure yet of what that's going to look like, that we will take your name and write your question down. And as soon as we find out, she has everybody's emails that have signed up for this, and we will get back to you.
And also, I'm sure that Amy Yeager, who's our conference communicator and who is on this call, we'll be putting a lot of the information on the conference website, and I'll show you that web address in a minute, but where you'll be able to get information there.
Yeah, and as soon as, and we have told you this website is controlled by the General Conference staff, not the Western North Carolina Conference. We are waiting, just like you, but we have been told it will launch by the end of this month, and when that launches, it will be everywhere. I meet with Amy. I talk to her about every day. It will be all over our website. It will, like I said, it will be on the welcometogc.org website. We will have this out for you. It will not be hard for you to find this. I can promise you that when it is launched, it is going to be launched. So you just like me, get ready. In addition to, there will be things on that website, like a video that we've compiled for General Conference. And I said the brochure will be on there. So there will be, it is my hope that by January 1st, there will be more information than you have time to read, kind of like Kim's book.
Okay, are we ready for the poll?
Sure.
Looks like we're going to have a good crowd.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I look forward to all of you. As I said, we want as much involvement as we can possibly have. This is an opportunity for our conference and to not only to be hospitable, but to learn about what goes on as our church. I mean, we're all United Methodists, and that's what we're here to support and learn about. So thank you. I look forward to seeing all of you.
So I'm going to talk just a minute, if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. About what else happens at General Conference, because I talked about the legislation and that takes a significant amount of time, but that's not all that happens. And somebody asked, when would the schedule be available? I hope it will be available in the next set of legislation that they post online. I hope there will also be a schedule, and maybe we can pull that schedule out and put it on our website, just the General Conference schedule. They say it'll be similar to the one that was proposed for 2020, but we have not yet seen a detailed schedule of the 2024 General Conference. But we know there will be worship, and worship is always one of the most inspirational and just great experiences of General Conference. So there'll be different worship experiences throughout the 2 weeks. There will be presentations and reports. So at some point, a laity address will be scheduled. An Episcopal address, one of our bishops is chosen to give the Episcopal address, and that will be scheduled. And there's always a young people's address. So one or more youth, young adults will be scheduled to be a part of a young people's address. So those are always exciting and interesting experiences. They will commission missionaries, deaconesses, and home missioners as part of the General Conference meeting. And then also there will be the election of judicial council, university senate members, and other kind of administrative parts of the denomination that have to be identified. So when the schedule comes out, it'll give you a much more detailed about what's happening when, and most of the time, if not all the time, when there's a worship service scheduled or a special kind of presentation or speaker, it's called an order of the day. And no matter what's going on at that time, when that time comes, they'll stop whatever we're in the middle of business-wise, and they'll go ahead and do what is scheduled. So generally, I think you can count on, if you were coming for a particular thing and it was on the schedule at a particular time, more or less, I think you'll be able to count on the fact that it'll happen at that time. General conference has to adjourn every day at 6:30. That's a rule that was instituted a couple times ago. I'm pretty sure it's 6:30. And except on the last night of legislation, so I guess that's Saturday night of the first week, it can go until 9 or 9:30. So early days of general conference, when I participated, the meetings could go long into the night. And after that, people got tired of that. So they instituted a rule that we're going to adjourn by 6:30 every night. So that'll be helpful for you to know too, if you want to be a visitor or a volunteer. So let's look at a poll. If you were to choose which one of the things I just mentioned you might be most interested in coming to observe, what would you be interested in? The polls are really just for fun. You're not making any commitments. You're just kind of participating for fun. So what would you be interested in? So I guess not surprisingly, a lot of people would really be interested in being a part of worship, and that's great. And then kind of evenly divided among the other things. So I hope you will be able to come at the time that you're interested in something in particular and get to be a part of it.
Okay, so I guess that's me. And the question is, what happens after general conference? And the question probably ought to be, what else could happen after general conference? I mean, with all the work and everything that happens during that time, what else is there to be done? Well, there's lots to be done, especially in our local churches and in our local annual conferences. So first of all, let me just say, if you have the opportunity to come to a worship service, I will tell you, for me, that is the most meaningful part of general conference, because despite all the discussion that goes on about legislation and the meetings and everything else that takes place, somehow when we come together for worship, we as United Methodists know how to do that well. And the services are beautiful, they're meaningful. And in this day and time, I certainly think we could use some meaningful, heartfelt worship. So I would encourage you to come to that, and also to hear any of the addresses, especially the laity address. So what happens after general conference? Well, first of all, constitutional amendments will have to be ratified, and they're ratified by 2/3 of all the members of the annual conference voting. That will happen, excuse me, that will happen at a later date. There will be a new book of discipline. And as I said before, probably published in January, we certainly hope. The general agencies will have to organize, because they'll have new members, and those members will have to be put in place and educated. So they will have organization following the general conference, and that won't happen immediately, but it will happen in the time, sometime in the months following general conference. The apportionments, of course, they're going to be determined by the new budget, but they won't start until 2025. And of course, there are decisions that will be made at general conference that may, in fact, impact that. So one of those decisions could be about regionalization and how that might impact our budget going forward. And then if we can go to the next slide, here's what will happen for us. Our annual conference will be in June 21st through the 23rd of 2024. The Southeastern Jurisdictional Conference, which is typically the conference where we elect bishops, that conference will be held in July 10th through the 12th, and both of these will be held at Lake Junaluska. I think that's all I have to cover at this point. I do have
Wait, Jennifer,
poll.
before you do the poll,
Yeah.
because it's been in our conference news, and you just said normally at Southeastern Jurisdiction Conference we elect bishops, but Amy has put the Committee on Episcopacy statement out. So I want to just be sure we're not kind of saying conflicting things. And that
Okay.
is that this year this July, the recommendation will be from the the Jurisdictional Committee on Episcopacy to the Jurisdictional Conference that we do not elect any new bishops. So if that proposal is approved, we won't be electing bishops this year. I just wanted to be clear about that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I couldn't remember if we had already published that or not. But yes, the recommendation from the jurisdiction is that we not elect any new bishops this year. We will have the jurisdictional conference though, but there's a lot of business that will be taken care of during that time, and there'll be a lot of educational opportunities I think that will occur as well. Okay.
And there's a question in the chat about will the conference create video content for educating congregations? And I'm absolutely sure we will. Our communications office is really good at that. Bishop Carter is really good at videos. So we'll take that to heart and really think about what will churches want to know about the decisions made at General Conference, and see if there aren't a variety of ways to get that information out to laity, clergy, and churches.
And then there's an additional question, will it be to decide how to implement any changes? That won't be the primary purpose of our annual conference in June, but I'm sure there may be some discussion around any changes that might be necessary, or at least some reporting on any changes that might be necessary. I think that's the last question I saw. All right, so we have one more poll. And here it is. It's how are you most connected into the United Methodist Church? Through mission and service in your local community? Do you serve on a district committee? Are you a lay member of the annual conference? By giving your offering and encouraging apportionment payments? Through worship and study in your church, or as a clergy person serving under appointment? So we're going to put that poll up. We want to see the mix. How the folks, those of you who are on the call tonight, are connected to the United Methodist Church. Dave? There it comes.
Okay, so Dave, if we can show the next slide, and then I'm going to share my screen instead of you for just a minute to show how to navigate. So these are the two primary websites, except for, I say two, but they're really going to be three. I didn't want to give you the third one that Wanda's already given you because it's not available quite yet, but I'm going to show you one of these. This first one, the resourceumc.org, I'm going to show you that one. But that's the general church website that has the information, different kinds of information about the general conference. And then this is our conference website. I always like to do a promotion on related to our conference website. If you do not get e-news, which is the Wednesday newsletter that comes out from our Office of Communications every week, I really encourage you to go to WNCCUMC.org and scroll down to the bottom and sign up for the newsletter, because it is the best way to stay in touch. If you want one way to stay in touch with what's going on in the United Methodist Church, our annual conference does a great job of talking about what's going on in the conference, the districts, the denomination. So if you're not already receiving e-news on Wednesdays, I recommend that. Dave's putting the websites in the chat so that you can link to them straight from your computer or your phone if you're on that. Dave, can I share screen for a minute? Okay. I just wanted to show you, this is the Resource UMC website. And just when you go there, you can see, you'll know you're there because you'll see the image of General Conference. And then when you scroll down, the most recent news that has come out related to General Conference will be what's next. So they're doing a delegate orientation, but this is the regionalization webpage. So if you clicked on view legislation, that's where you can get some of the details about the regionalization proposals. The other thing I wanted to show you was here's where you can get to the Daily Christian Advocate. So if you hit download, you'll see volume 1 is a handbook, and then these are the sections of the book I held up and showed you, the big book. These are the downloads of those, and eventually we'll also have the downloads of the new legislation. And then you go down here and you get more information. So this is a primary place, resourceumc.org, churchwide General Conference 2020. I'm going to stop sharing. I just want you to see it so you knew when you were going to look for it. Every time I need to get to that page, which is at least a few times a day these days, I just Google General Conference 2020 UMC, and usually that page comes up, or something, another page that I can get to it. So if you can't find it, just Google it and you'll get to it. We're going to take a minute and do some questions. And I have a couple that were asked earlier that we'll answer. And then I see, oh, I got one directly, but I'm going to answer it out loud because other people might be wondering about it. And the question was, since delegates from the postponed General Conference will be in attendance, are there some of the delegates that are from disaffiliated churches? And if so, will they get to vote? And you have to be United Methodist to serve as a delegate to General Conference. So anybody that left the United Methodist Church along with their church or by choice, they're no longer a United Methodist Church member, they forfeited or resigned their place as a General Conference delegate. So for example, in Western North Carolina, we had 3 laity spots open up, not only for this reason. A couple people resigned because of other things going on in their lives. But we ended up with 3 openings to jurisdictional conference for our laity. And so at the last annual conference meeting in 2023, we elected 3 new people to fill those spots. So in our delegation, you can be reassured that all of our members of the delegation are also members of a United Methodist Church. Okay, Scott, we appreciate that, and we will definitely take that into consideration. A couple of other questions we had earlier. Will there be a way to watch the General Conference virtually or from your computer or your phone? And the answer to that is yes. And when we get close to, we'll be sure you have on our website page, we have the link to that. But you can watch General Conference from home, so that will be an option. I got the answer to the question thanks to Amy Coles. The Book of Discipline is available in English, Spanish, and Korean. So I was wrong about the choice of French, but English, Spanish, and Korean are the 3 ways you can, 3 translations of the Book of Discipline. Somebody asked if the delegates from Western North Carolina would be available, that list of who they are. We will make that available online. I was glad for that reminder because the list that you might be able to find, the old list, is not accurate anymore. So we'll get that list updated, and I've made a note for that. You've asked about the slides to this, and we'll send out the slides so that if you want to share the presentation with your congregation or others, we can get that to you. And okay, I think those are the questions I wrote down, except for the other one that somebody asked is, why would my pastor ask me to participate in this Equip and Connect conversation tonight? And so anyway, I hope the answer to that is clear along the way. But one other thing I wanted to add about that, and that is, as you can imagine, because General Conference is going to be in Charlotte, the local and regional news outlets will pick it up. And so probably it will be in the news locally and throughout Western North Carolina in ways that it has not been in previous jurisdictions. I mean, in previous General Conferences when it was out in Portland or other parts of the country. So as a result, I think it's important that our United Methodists in Western North Carolina know it's going on. Oftentimes, I know this is being recorded, so I'm always careful about what I say, but I think it's okay to say this. Oftentimes, the news outlets pick up the most inflammatory or what they think people might be most interested in, I guess, but it's not always the most helpful, and it doesn't always make us look in the best light that we would want. And it's not always the full story. Sometimes it's just part of a story. Sometimes they don't get multiple perspectives, they get one perspective. So I think it's important that that United Methodist in Western North Carolina know this is coming. They know that it'll be in the news. And they also know to be listening for other news outlets like the United Methodist News Service and the Western North Carolina Annual Conference, and you to get a fuller picture of what has been decided, what is being decided, what is going on in real time. So I think that's another good reason for you to be on this call tonight, is so that you have been educated somewhat in advance about some of what's going to happen. You can keep paying attention and keep updating what you know. And then as it's happening, really stay in touch with what's going on so that we can all communicate along the way. The Daily Advocate, so the Daily Digest, it is called the DCA. So there will be something daily posted on the General Conference site, which is distributed to delegates by paper, but you'll be able to access it, and that gives you some idea of what happens every day. There'll be like articles of what has been happening and what is happening. So Thelma, thanks for that question. There will be kind of real-time ongoing information available from the General Conference webpage about what's happening.
Hey, Kim,
Jennifer.
I'd like to just remind folks that for that person who asked, why would my pastor want me to attend this? Remember, we live in a world now of 24-hour a day news, and it's very competitive. And so you will probably see not only the local news stations there every day and in different places around the convention center, and maybe even in the hotel or at the airport, but you'll see some people from international news and national news stations. And I think for us in Charlotte and Western North Carolina, it's just a super great opportunity to talk about how proud we are of our conference, our area, and our church. Put a smile on your face, and this is just, it's a super opportunity for us. So we can boost the hospitality. We'll all have the opportunity, Wanda, to boost the hospitality and show how gracious we are.
I agree. We've talked about that, and that's one of the reasons we'd like for you to distribute the brochure in your churches. As I've talked to people, and I said, we need to, everybody in Western North Carolina needs to know this is going to be happening. I don't want, and I don't think any of us want, someone to wake up one morning and it be on the front of the newspaper and then they don't know. So we're going to do everything we possibly can to get the word out there and get the correct information to you. I encourage your local churches to be talking about this and informing you so that you do know what is the correct information. Because like Jennifer said, we all live in a world of 24-hour news, and sometimes it's not the best.
Exactly. And we have a chance to make it a little bit more uplifting than it is.
We have an opportunity here, not only for our city, but our conference and our church.
Our church. Yeah.
That's right.
So let's see. Wanda, the brochure that you just mentioned, Jessica's asked where will be the best place to get it. I assume on the web pages we've been talking about.
When it's launched, then it will have the video and the brochure and ways for you to volunteer and just all the information that you're going to need. So, and like I said, they have promised us, or we have been told, that it will be launched by the end of this month. Just keep looking for it. I will keep looking for it. If I see it before you do, I'll let you know.
So friends, is there anything else we can answer for you that we might or might not know the answer to, but we would do our best? I think we've got a lot of the questions that have come through the chat. Just wanted to be sure that you feel as well informed and educated as possible tonight. And then we'll keep working together on it between now and April. I don't see any other questions coming in through the chat, Wanda. So you want to close us out?
We just appreciate that all of you have been here tonight. And could we just close in a prayer? Heavenly Father, as we navigate this new adventure for the Western North Carolina Conference, I ask that you cover all of us with your gentleness and your enlighten us and help us to be the most hospitable, the most gracious host that General Conference could have. We ask that you help us be good stewards and shine the light of the United Methodist Church and all the good work that each and every one of these people on here and in our conference is doing. And we just ask that we all continue to pray for each other. We ask for grace for each other. It's going to be a new experience where we are going to be learning together, and we need to have grace for each other and grace for those that we will be encountering along the way. We thank you for Kim and Jennifer and all the information that they have shared with us. We thank you for each one of you that are interested in what's happening. And we just ask all of these prayers in the name of our Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Good night, friends.
Have a good week. Thanks so much for joining.
That's right. We'll see you at General Conference.